Discovery calls aren't just about making a sale. They're about truly understanding your buyer's world. It's about uncovering their challenges, learning their pain points, and showing them you genuinely care about their success. By asking thoughtful questions and actively listening, you build trust and create a connection that goes beyond the product or service you're offering. That's a quote from Amanda Crooks and a sneak peek at today's episode. Hi there, I'm Kerry Curran, business growth consultant, industry analyst, and host of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, where we discuss strategies that drive business growth. In today's episode, titled Unlocking Revenue Growth, the Power of Discovery Calls and Buyer Insights, I'm joined by Amanda Crooks, Head of Sales and Marketing at Blink Metrics. Amanda and I had a great conversation where we discussed the critical role of discovery calls in driving revenue growth. Amanda shares her expertise on how asking the right questions, actively listening, and understanding buyer pain points can not only build trust, but also uncover opportunities to create tailored solutions that resonate with prospective clients. Stay tuned to the end, where Amanda shares tips on using learnings from discovery calls for your website content strategy. This episode will leave you equipped to turn conversations into conversions and boost your revenue potential. Let's go. So welcome, Amanda. Please introduce yourself and share your background and expertise.
Awesome. Kerry, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. You know, I'm a huge fan, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Amanda Crooks. I am the head of sales and marketing for Blink Metrics, which is an automated KPI tracking solution for small business. And a little bit about my background. It's been a curvy path. I've worked in sales and marketing for a long time. I have done roles selling sponsorships for live events. I came to Blink Metrics from a very large marketing agency. I've always been a very curious person. I love doing puzzles, but I also love when I encounter a puzzle in the workplace. So a big part of my journey has just been finding a new challenge and finding something that isn't quite right and figuring out how to fit different pieces together to solve a problem, to make something easier or more efficient. And it's been really fun working within sales and marketing to apply those skills.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Amanda. We're very excited to have you on. Amanda, like she mentioned, Amanda and I actually met on LinkedIn, just communicating because we are very like-minded, connecting that or building that interconnectivity between sales and marketing in a very lean environment. So I've learned a lot from, your posts, Amanda, and excited to have you join here today. So a lot of things we were talking about in our previous conversations was just obviously the importance of the interconnectivity between marketing and sales in so many different ways, but how marketing obviously needs to fuel sales, and having that right content and messaging in everything that you're publishing. The data we're seeing around it's a buyer's market these days. Buyers are spending more time researching. This is especially in B2B and any kind of considered purchase, spending more time researching, kind of shortlisting choices before ever even speaking to sales. So part of that is just getting more and more into the buyer's mindset so we can write the right content to kind of scratch their itch, but also learn more about their pain points. And Amanda, you and I were talking about like one of the most important ways, the best ways we can do that is the discovery call. So talk to me about kind of your strategy, approach, and philosophy on the importance of a really good discovery call.
Yes. discovery calls, it's such a vast topic, and so I know we'll get into the details of it, but I do a lot of discovery calls. A huge part of my job is just getting on the phone with people, talking through their individual situation and their pain points. And like you said, Carrie, the way to get people on discovery calls, the first hurdle is the website and the marketing and getting on that short list of competitors that they're
Hmm.
considering to solve a certain problem. And I think one of the most important parts of a discovery call is really trying to understand what they're trying to solve, understand what challenges they're facing in their business. And so my approach to discovery calls or philosophy about them, it really is about getting to understand the person on the other side of the phone and understand where they're coming from. Um, and I could go deep down a rabbit hole in any direction, but it's about learning. It's called discovery for a reason. I was thinking about this earlier, and it's sort of like an archaeological dig, right? Where ideally you get on a discovery call and you discover an entire, dinosaur skeleton, and you're like, this is perfect and it's amazing, and our product is the right solution for them. That's the ideal, but there's no harm in doing a discovery call, and you might find a piece of a broken pot, but you still
Yeah.
have learned something about the your prospect or your customer or who is or isn't a right fit. So I think even discovery calls that don't end in a sale are still really important and can be very impactful for your business.
No, I definitely agree. And, I love some of what you're saying earlier as well. It's not just uncovering, what their challenges, which obviously is so critically important, but in learning more about them, the decision makers, the company, the challenge, but also it's building trust and building that relationship as well.
Yes, trust is a huge piece of it, and I think so often when buyers are having discovery calls with a bunch of different options that they think
Mhm.
could be a solution to their problem, I think one of the biggest mistakes that companies can make is getting on discovery calls and immediately jumping into a demo and talking about their product and its features and what they do and what matters to them. And sometimes they don't spend enough time asking questions and asking
Mhm.
the buyer about their processes, their business, how things function, what is already efficient, but what might need to be optimized, even if the buyer doesn't themselves know it. It's you really need to treat discovery calls as an opportunity to learn about somebody else's business, not just to talk
Mhm.
about your own. And I think that process of asking questions and really listening, and not listening so that you can tell them a solution and push them toward a sale, but really listening and empathizing with the situation they're in, that builds a lot of trust. And I'm not the only person to say this. At the end of the day, even if you're selling B2B software, you're selling to a human. And it's
Mhm.
about that human connection, and treating the person on the other side of the discovery call as a human goes a very long way.
Yeah, and I love all of that, and you're so spot on. And I think, from what I've seen, and I do a lot of discovery call coaching, and have in my career, is that you're right. Like sometimes people are just jumping to talk about their company themselves, or like, and not even like just so focused on the next question that not really listening to the answer to your point. And it's like that's how you're going to uncover the dinosaur bones or the pod, is like really listening and then asking those follow-up questions that maybe aren't in your script, because you're really leaning into what they're talking about or their pain points, and asking questions that can give you more insight into customizing your next conversation.
Yeah, I get into trouble with this sometimes because I I I get so curious and I want to
Mhm.
learn so much that every once in a while, I can even ask too many questions about this person and what their day to day looks like, and it can veer off the path of talking about our product and our solution and how it fits into their business. But it's helpful in painting a fuller picture, because I
Mm-hmm.
think with any software like Blink Metrics, it needs to fit into the larger business purpose.
Right.
And in order to understand that, you do need to know some details that are kind of outside the scope of what your product solves, but your product is going to end up affecting them
Mm-hmm.
at some point. So really giving yourself time and space to have that sort of conversation is, for me, very important in making sure that your product is the right solution, that, for us, that Blink Metrics is the right thing for this specific company to implement at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with that. And are there kind of questions that you've found that you're always using kind of in your discovery calls that help dig into some of those, like uncovering more insight?
I've got a whole document with
Yeah.
probably 100 different questions, and
Mm-hmm.
I've bucketed them into categories. Sort of the initial questions of, why are you even on this call, right? What encouraged
Mm-hmm.
you to book this call with us? Going
Yeah.
into just questions that help you get deeper. You, can you tell me more about that? Oh, you mentioned this. Will you give me a little bit more context there? All the way through to questions understanding the urgency and making them
Mm-hmm.
feel okay
Yes.
if
Yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not urgent, because you always want to match customer urgency. So
Mm-hmm.
understanding, is this a problem that you wish you had solved 6 months ago, and it's a firestorm and we need to take quick action? Or is this more something that you're interested in implementing for your business, and it's something that will probably take a few months of very slow casual education on your side
Mm-hmm.
before you're ready to make a purchase decision? Because learning that in the discovery call, which I think is the appropriate time to ask, can help inform the rest of the sales process. How often you're following up, what sort of information you're sharing. Because if someone's just interested in education, send them resources. Like for
Right.
us at Blink
Yeah.
Metrics, we know the data space really well, and we can send them just educational information. But if we've got someone who is living in a chaotic data environment and they are actively feeling the pain of that every single day, they don't need a blog post about
Yeah.
what's happening in the data space. They need
Mm-hmm.
you to solve that problem for them. So it being mindful about discovery can help the entire sales process, whether it's a week or a year.
This episode of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, is brought to you by Kriglu. Want to boost customer acquisition while saving time and money? Meet Kriglu, an AI-powered omnichannel bid management platform designed to optimize your ad spend. Kriglu intelligently adjusts bids across channels, ensuring your ads reach the right audience at the lowest cost. Plus, with its automation, you'll free up valuable time to focus on your business. The result? Efficient, cost-effective growth, all while maximizing your marketing budget. Ready to scale smarter and faster? Visit Kriglu.com, Kriglo.com, and start saving today. No, that is so smart, and thank you, Amanda, because that's such a good point of, and again, that goes back to trust, building trust, and kind of reflecting what you're hearing is matching their pace, and not pressuring them for a sale today when they've been very clear that, oh, I'm still in the research phase, or I'm not going to have budget for until next quarter, or that kind of just where they are in their buying cycle. So it's so smart. One best practice that I've implemented for myself and for teams that I've coached and led is to send the questions in advance, not in a fill this questionnaire out. The last thing you want to do is give them homework. But to give them a heads up of like, these are the questions I'm going to be asking, just so you're aware and can think about the answers. Because if it's, to your point of like, they might be able to answer everything on the spot without any like extra thought, but it might be, we want to know, often depending on what the product or solution is that we're selling, like sometimes we want to know annual sales data from previous years or any whatever their, um and so they'll need to look that up. Another, actually, and that reminds me as well, is often when I was selling agency services, we would from the get-go ask if they needed an NDA or mutual NDA signed prior to the conversation, so that we're not rescheduling because all of a sudden we get on the discovery call and they're like, oh wait, I can't talk to you about, and I can't answer any of these questions without an NDA. So actually that was one of the workflows we put into place, was asking if they need an NDA before we even had the conversation. So just so you know, from some tactical best practices of sharing some of the questions. I know you said you have 100 questions. You don't want to like overwhelm them, but just a high level. And I know in times we would send that in a very polished document with like our logo, their logo, and we would get feedback that they were just, because it put a nice first foot forward of looking very polished and prepared. So anyway, little tangent on some best practices. So we talked a lot about the content or the information you learn and how you then use that, whether it's for your next demo or pitch call or presentation. So talk a bit about kind of how you then customize some of the learnings that you collect.
Yeah, it's so for us, we tend to have I guess it's a two-part discovery call. My preference, the first is discovery, learning
Mhm.
about their business, learning what tools and platforms they're using to run their business, understanding if we're even a good solution um, because we are a data solution for businesses, and we're pulling data out of all of these tools and platforms into one central location so that businesses can use them more easily for insights into the whole business. The first call we have is usually discovery and understanding, what does their current data infrastructure look like? What types
Mhm.
of information are they looking to track or more closely monitor? And that's a lot of information that we need from them. And we typically use that call to inform, is our solution even a good fit for you?
Right.
And if the answer to that is yes, then we'll schedule a separate call, which is a tailored demo, where
Mhm.
we then actually share, this is what BlinkMetrics is based on your business and your processes. This is how you might consider using it. Um, every once in a while, we'll run into the opposite, where people will come to the first call and say, I just want to see your product. I want to see the demo. And so they're coming at it from the opposite direction, which is they're looking at what we do and our
Mhm.
product, and
Mhm.
then they're taking that internally and trying to figure out how that fits into their operations. And then the second call is more them coming to the discovery call and sharing what they think could work. So it can go either way. For me, I always love to do discovery first, because BlinkMetrics is such a specific type of product that if we know what types of companies it works for,
Mhm.
um, and that list is vast, and we're constantly figuring out, who is our ICP, and what is the direction that we want to go. But
Yep.
I like to do discovery calls first, because then we can really, one, make the assessment of whether or not our solution is right, and then come to the demo, and not just give them a demo that they're coming in and it's the same slide deck that I talk
Right.
through in a monotone voice for every single person that books one,
Yeah.
but it's a demo for them. And I think
Mhm.
that that gives you a much higher chance of closing a deal if they're seeing your product and
Mhm.
visualizing it and having a conversation about the way your product could be used for them specifically.
Yeah. That is so smart, and you're right. I love what you said about helping them visualize how this is going to work, how you're going to help them make their life easier. They're going to get smarter data. They're going to whatever their business challenges that you're solving. You're demonstrating very specifically how you're going to help with that. And again, I think that's so smart. And it's in a lot of the sales coaching and teams that I've led, it's we're selling services, so it's the same approach. It can't be just a creds deck of this is who we are, we've been around this long, we have offices in these locations. No, it needs to be like, what we heard is that this is what your challenges are, this is what you're trying to achieve. We're going to walk you through like how we've done that and why we're the best partner to do that for you again. But to your point, like bringing in the specific examples that they shared in the discovery call, and starting it off with, this is what we heard, is this kind of aligned with the challenges that you're seeing and feeling. Making sure we're all on the same page before we start telling you how we're going to make your life better. So it's I think that goes back to what you're saying as well, of like trust in relationship building. It's like, we heard you, let's, and we're here for you.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. And you sort of take that homework off of their plate and do it
yeah.
for them. But
Mm-hmm.
discovery calls are also just such a not just from in the sales process, but there's such a rich environment to learn about not just your customers and prospective customers, but your own business.
Yeah,
And when
love that.
people are coming in, I'm tying this back to marketing because I know this
Yeah.
is a marketing podcast, but
Yeah.
when people are coming into discovery calls, they're sharing with you what they currently believe about your
Mm-hmm.
product, which is
Mm-hmm.
what they learned from your website, what they learned from your social media posts. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
coming in with questions for you about, I saw this. Am I understanding it correctly? I was confused on this thing I saw on your website. Can you clarify that for me? How does it work? And those types of questions and that kind of feedback is
Mm-hmm.
also such an amazing thing to get during a discovery call. Um, and I think having a discovery call where you're having that open conversation, you learn a lot about where your shortcomings are, where you might need to change a certain word or message on your website. And we talked about this earlier, Kerry. We're in a unique position having worked in lean companies because you can make those pivots very quickly. As the head of sales and marketing at Blink Metrics, when I hear something on discovery calls, especially if I hear it on more than one discovery call, I
Mm-hmm.
think to myself, I need to change that on the website because
Yeah.
multiple people have this question coming into
Mm-hmm.
the call. If we just clarify it a bit on the front end, then people will come into the calls with a better understanding of what we can do. And so I just make a task for myself in Asana. And then at some point in the next few days, I'll go and update the website. And um, not everyone has that privilege or
Yeah.
that burden, some might say.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is really helpful internally to the information you learn in a discovery call to have that feedback loop between sales and marketing. Because if you're treating discovery calls just as the first step in the sales process, you're missing a ton of opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
inform the marketing as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that example so much, Amanda, and you're so spot on, right? That the more you can learn about your customer, your buyer, and how you can better inform them early on, like we were saying at the beginning, of that they're in control, they're doing the research to decide who to shortlist. And I love that, like finding the trends and commonalities between all of your conversations and understanding, like, is this a new pain point that's evolved or emerged, or just to your point, like clarifying some of the brand messaging and or unique value props that you're communicating. So all of it, but like also what we said before, like just anytime you're working on better messaging or communicating of your product, service, brand, is marketing. And that's, I think, why it's so important to have that lens in the sales process of, bringing that, how are we being persuasive and communicating to the listener that this is the right fit for you. And so even though it's a sales call, like that kind of thought process and kind of approach and methodology, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, is marketing. And why it just goes back to why it's so important to have that interconnectivity between the two. And I know it's a lot harder, to your point, when it's a much larger team, but that's when you need to have those communication loops and strategy sessions and feedback. But I love all of this and everything you've shared today. I think it's extremely valuable because sometimes we're moving so fast, trying to get a sale so quickly, that we don't stop and evaluate, like, how can I improve the steps of the sales process? And the discovery call is such a critical one. So thank you so much. Any other tips to share for people that want to kind of learn more from their customers in their discovery calls?
Oh boy. I think my top tips are just be curious. You
Mm-hmm.
might have had the same discovery call 100 times, but that 101st might be different. And so always coming to the call with just an open mind and curiosity, and don't assume you know the answer. I mean, you might always know the answer. You might know what people are going to say, but if you can trick yourself into staying curious, I think you give yourself a lot more opportunity to learn something. And also just treating people like humans. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that goes a really long way in building trust. And even if your discovery call and demo are one and the same, finding ways to pause during the demo and you know don't forget to ask questions, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
stay curious and treat people like people. I'm sure there's a million other things I could come up with if you gave me the time, but
So smart.
those are my
Mhm.
top two.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. Really enjoyed having you and having this conversation. Lastly, how can people find you?
Yes. So my company, Blink Metrics, is blinkmetrics.com. If you've got any questions for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/Amanda M as in Michelle Crooks. That's my full name. And yeah, I would love to connect with anyone that's got questions, even if it's not about doing a demo or, Blink Metrics in general. If you've got questions about data infrastructure, I really just want to connect with somebody, I'm really open to it. So thank you,
Awesome.
Carrie.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much
Yeah.
for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We've really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I hope you found this episode of Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, as valuable as I did. I loved how Amanda incorporates insights from her calls into her website content strategy. If you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, for more expert advice on smarter marketing strategies. And connect with me, Kerry Curran, on LinkedIn or at revenuebasedmarketing.com, where I share more expert advice and past podcast episodes. If your revenue needs a boost, ask me about my consulting and fractional chief growth officer services.